kind of felt like at any stage we were going to hit the ground, and it was a weird situation of like looking forward at the front of the aircraft, just wondering when that impact moment was going to happen. So it was distressing, like looking back.
G'day, and welcome to Wellbeing. I'm Jack Hodgins. Today we are talking with Michael Raymond, an Airforce veteran with a PTSD journey. Michael joined the Royal Australian Air Force aged 18, initially as an avionics technician. He had a 16-year career with the Air Force, working on fighter jets and a number of other projects. Michael was medically retired with PTSD following a near-death aeroplane experience. Michael struggled with his PTSD, but with new innovative psychedelic treatments, Michael has found success in recovery. Hello, Michael, and welcome to Wellbeing.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jack.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about your time in the Air Force?
I joined the Air Force here in Melbourne at 18 years old, and went on a 16-year career there. And where I in the short version, I basically had some mental health battles towards the end there, and I originally joined as a avionics technician. And the funny thing was, I wasn't actually that interested in jets. I was actually wanted to join the army. So my nan was convincing me that I should aim a little bit higher with that. I was just going to join, the army infantry, and because I was a bit of a fitness freak and health freak, but I was also pretty technically minded. So my nan suggested, why don't you try something more technical and see how you go. So she suggested I'd try for the Air Force. When I went through all the testing and all that, I sort of did quite well. And yeah, they suggested I join as an avionics technician. So that's like testing, fixing all the electronics and oxygen systems and explosive ordnance and things like that on the fighter jets. So I found myself in that career, and I kind of was expecting to fail out. And so I was hoping in some ways secretly to fail out so that I wanted to join the army. So it was a funny thing. And then, 10 years later, I found myself after working on, big strike bombers like F-111s and little trainer jets, and then I found myself kind of at the top of my career in avionics as a supervisor, sort of potentially going to be promoted to sergeant and all of that, and working on Super Hornet jets. And I found myself in this funny position 10 years later that I just didn't expect to be in, and just looked around and went, wow, okay, how did this happen? After that I actually changed over to be a electrical engineer. I trained up as that, and then I found myself as electrical engineering officer, working in quite high security environments, and quite high stress environments along the way. And then I finished out my career in projects.
Did you have any confronting experiences during your time in the Air Force?
Well, the whole environment is something that you don't realise how different it is until, I'm still sort of adjusting to this life outside of it. It was all I knew since I was 18. So, it's a high pressure world, and it's a life where, you basically give yourself over to this organisation, and there's so many amazing experiences, and it's such, looking back, I've got so many amazing memories, and had so many great friends along the way. But it was a very high pressure environment, often very volatile. You're working around explosive ordnance, you're working around quite dangerous equipment, and you're kind of expected you're training to go to war potentially, and there's the consequences of that high intensity environment. So me personally, I had some sort of traumatic events along the way, but there's one I'm quite more comfortable speaking with, and speaking about, which is, I was going over there to Hawaii to pick up, America, to pick up Super Hornets, and we were bringing the Super Hornets back, and we were actually in Hawaii, and I was taking off with this big fuel tanker. It was fully loaded with fuel, and as we were just lifting off, and we were sort of turning to the right to avoid this huge mountain in Waikiki, and the right engine started exploding through, some of the blades started disintegrating, and we found ourselves with this engine exploding and the pilot having to make this maneuver. It turns out when I spoke to the pilot later, and he explained how close we were to, only seconds away from disaster. And we narrowly missed the ground. Waikiki Beach, they evacuated the beach. The explosions were heard all around that part of the island, made the news and all that. And we found ourselves in this precarious position where, you got two engines, you got fully loaded fully loaded full of fuel, and we just struggled to get altitude, and there was just this precarious situation where we found ourselves really not sure if we're going to make it through it. So we had to basically just dump fuel to try and get light enough to land, and all the while just wondering whether the other engines would hold up enough or we'd be able to land safely. So, and we found ourselves that was quite a harrowing experience. And then, there's along the way, there was other confronting stuff, which I can't really band on too much.
Would you be comfortable sharing what is it like being in a plane that is kind of going down, as it were? Like what does it feel like?
Well, yeah, a lot goes through your head for me, because it's not like in a commercial plane. We're in this American, United States tanker, and so we can hear the pilots, and we could hear the distress in their voice. We could hear, them yelling. We could hear how dire the situation was just in their voice. And the other crew that were flying the day before were sitting just in front of me. So, and you could see the looks on their faces and them pulling their seatbelts tight. And, you knew when they start stressing, it's time to stress yourself. I was closest to the engines, and I had it mechanically minded enough to know that it wasn't very good with the sound of the explosions. I just felt out of control. And for me, I was pretty good at I just sort of detached from the situation. I kind of went, okay, well, there's nothing I can do about this. And it was just sort of, that feeling like, I don't know, it's like maybe standing on one of those platforms, when someone's about to, they could hit the buzzer at any time and it could fall from under you. Kind of felt like at any stage we were going to hit the ground, and so it was a weird situation of looking forward at the front of the aircraft, just wondering when that impact moment was going to happen. So it was, it was pretty distressing, looking back. Yeah.
When it happened, mentally, did it really impact you mentally straight away, or was it kind of like it kind of took a bit of time for it to really kind of become in your mind?
I was kind of one of those people which I'm pretty good at just pushing things aside and just staying busy. And for me, I felt like I just wasn't affected by it, to be honest. I came back and, we landed back in Hawaii safely, and we kind of just, there was that moment of, okay, we made it. And for me, I just was so, I don't know, I did have a bit of identity of being a bit of a man's man. Like I was into my martial arts, I was into motorbike riding, I was into doing all those sorts of things. And I kind of, I don't know, in some ways I felt like that was part of my persona, and I wasn't very good at showing vulnerability or admitting weakness or admitting that I was affected by it. And if anything, out of everybody, people were surprised I was not really that affected, but that was my way of handling things. I just was quite good at sort of disassociating and just going, don't look at that. And so I just went back into life and I just stayed really busy. But I did notice, looking back, and then as I had more time to decompress as the busyness sort of went away, then, I noticed things were happening. I noticed, more stuff was creeping in about it, and it was coming up more and more often. I was having some stuff come up it was affecting my sleep and affecting a few things like that. And then looking back, I felt like now I've had more time to review, I've seen that my behavior changed a lot. Like I started making some pretty extreme sort of moves in life, which seemed out of character. Yeah. For instance, I just put my discharge into the Airforce and said I'm going to leave, and things like that. And also, I felt like I was risk taking a lot more, and starting to just drink a bit more, I think. There was a few shifts in my character looking back, which didn't make sense to me, because I only associated PTSD with guys that are on the front line. I thought, I don't know, that's nothing. It just didn't seem like anything. It didn't seem like it was worthy of that badge that is associated with the guys that have experienced, the front line stuff.
How long after the incident do you think you became aware of it? So you've mentioned you looking back, you were aware that now there's these shifts, but when was really the first time when you kind of said there's kind of something going on here? Yeah,
I was never the most calmest guy out there, but I did notice that my mental health was deteriorating. I just wasn't handling life like I used to be able to. My resilience was wearing away. I was hiding a lot of what my struggles away from friends and family. I was really hiding it, and so I was going through a lot of it behind the scenes. I think I just kept bottling things up. That was just my way of dealing with things, and not to show anyone, because I just thought that was weakness. a few hurdles in life around my career, around relationships, around it's life in general. And then I was working in quite high stress, volatile, sort of long hours, kind of confronting sort of work. And I noticed I just couldn't function like I used to, and then I couldn't keep up. So I used to just be able to push through and get the work done and just show up. And I noticed I just could not do it. I just started. I went, no, there's something wrong. I can't work at the pace I used to. I'm having these I was having I was driving to work, and then all of a sudden just be sort of burst out in tears, and I was like, what's going on with me? I've never been like this before, and the cracks really started to show, and until I just put my hand up and said, look, there's something wrong. I've just got to go to medical and really see what's going on. So, and that was the beginning of me transitioning out of defence, when I sort of realised what was going on.
Did you find that the PTSD affected your daily life a lot?
Well, the thing was, I think what happened for me is there was an element. It was a combination, because it wasn't just purely PTSD for me. I think there was depression and anxiety. There's other elements to it, and I think this is the case with a lot, from what I'm seeing with a lot of guys who have experienced trauma. It might not be just PTSD has certain signs and symptoms, but for me, I found I was getting triggered into these massive spirals of depression and suffering from this extreme anxiety over really small stuff. Well, looking back, and so. Yeah, I think it was just this combination of a lot of things.
You're listening to Wellbeing, a nationally distributed radio show and podcast. My guest today is Michael Raymond, an Airforce veteran with a PTSD story. Did it affect your relationships with others?
Yeah. Well, it started sort of affecting relationship with my partner, and it was pushing us further apart a little bit. I was just starting to get really disconnected, and I think I was just struggling to really connect. I was just shutting down a lot. It's the only way I knew how to do it, and sort of, I don't know, disassociating a little bit, a few things. I was just going through the only coping strategies I knew, and a lot of it was just, sometimes it was just apathy, I just don't have I don't know what's going on, and I don't know how to fix it. And I'm trying, I was trying to do all the things. I was trying to go to seek help through therapies, through, antidepressants, through mindfulness and all this stuff. And I was having little wins here and there, and I really felt like, I'm improving, but at the end of the day, I ended up still declining to points where, I just no longer wanted to be here, unfortunately.
What do you think a family member or friend can do to help someone that is kind of going through those kind of things?
That's a tough one. I think there's a lot of shame, especially with men, and I think that vulnerability is hard to tap into, because it's such an uncomfortable space, especially I think for military men to sit with a friend and say, are you all good? And then say, cut through it all and say, I want you to tell me, really honestly, and sit with them. I don't know. It's a tough situation to be in, because, you've got to be ready to hold space for that person. I mean, I've tried to do that with some of my friends in the military and really check in. And I think a lot of them have opened up to me, but sometimes I think with those sorts of people, I think sometimes you've got to make the first move in the vulnerability space. Maybe you sometimes are just admitting that, I've been struggling myself, or actually life hasn't been all peachy and it's not just okay. Like, I've actually gone through days where I've really struggled to get out of bed or things like that. And maybe, just opening up those little bits of yourself is kind of like an olive branch to allow them permission to also admit that they've maybe struggled as well, and it's not a sign of weakness.
What is the culture in the current time in the Air Force or in the military more generally towards like mental health and PTSD? Are they open to talk about it, or do we really need to do a bit more work?
Yeah, well, I've been out for about 3 years now, so and I know I think mental health coming in more recent times has really come into the frame a bit more in defence, and from people that are still in, I hear that they're still they're actually doing a lot more programs that are encouraging people to put mental health in the high priority. So I can't really speak for what's going on now, because I've been out for a while, But it's just one of those dynamics. I think when there's an element and there's a period of grace, I suppose, where you can go into the medical system and try to get better. But if it goes on and if it's extensive and it takes longer to rehabilitate, and unfortunately, it's pretty hard for defence to just keep you in service when it, if it goes on too long. So, there's an element of where they're naturally going to be looking at transitioning you out if it's ongoing. So, yeah, but I do think that, naturally you can't deny that, in defence, when obviously there's peacekeeping and all elements to defence, but there is that element of you've got to defend the nation and got to be prepared to go to war-like scenarios where being your most empathetic self might not be an appropriate frame to be in when you're in that environment, because you have to probably switch off that emotional side, that part, a big part of yourself, to be in that unsafe environment where you've pretty much got to be on edge in fight flight. And but yeah, that's obviously there's consequences to being in that state, especially for the frontline guys or people in operations a lot. I'd imagine it'd be really hard to de-escalate back into, if you imagine, like a father at home with their kids and in that sort of environment, you'd want all your fight flight system to be sort of offline and be back feeling safe and centered and in that more empathetic space. And then, but they're very polar opposites, and I could imagine it would be quite hard for, some people to switch in and out of that.
What did recovery look like to you? So we kind of mentioned a little bit about it, but like, what was your journey to finding the psychedelic therapy?
Yeah, so after things weren't working for me, I transitioned out of defence. My partner at the time was studying psychology and was also sort of at a bit of a crossroads in life and thinking about career change potentially and all of that. And yeah, she suggested to me, have you heard about these psychedelics, assisted therapies, and having a lot of success overseas with a lot of people. And so it piqued my interest a bit, but I was also not in a very good headspace. So like when you're in that really the depths of mental health battle, you're not really in the space where you go, oh yeah, I want to organise a whole trip and all of the ins and outs and the frustrations involved in travelling to South America and organising a retreat and all that. That was the last thing I wanted to do. So I was heavily resistant to it. And I was in a really negative mindset. So the thought of something working and getting me out of the state I was in, I struggled to really perceive it. And yeah, but she basically said, look, I'm going with or without you. Like, come on, let's go. I'll organise it all. And so, yeah, she did. And I went along and I got myself over there, and I was just amazed. For me, I'd been, I put on a brave face in front of friends and family, but really, I think a lot of them could tell I was still really, struggling. And I'd lost that lightness to myself, that humorous side, the playful side. And yeah, when I went over there too and experienced this psychedelic assisted therapies over there, I just couldn't believe the change. Like I woke up and then, I felt like this weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I'd moved through a lot of heaviness and stuff I'd been holding on to. And then it was just like the next day, I just woke up out of this depression. I woke up out of this echo chamber within my own mindset, and it was just gone. I was really present. I looked around and I was like, wow, I could see the beauty in the place I was in. I was just chatting with these people that were with me in the retreat, and they just couldn't believe. They just said, "You're like a new person. We didn't, it's like we didn't actually know you were like this. You're actually quite funny." And they could see, a more playful side to me, and they're like, "This is a totally different person that walked in that we met the other day." But yeah, and from that, I came back to Australia, and obviously there's a lot of stigma attached to these medicines, and so I found it hard to talk about them because people, I don't know what people were thinking I was doing, but and I just really wanted to talk about them and start asking questions about why isn't this available over here in Australia.
Yeah, do you think we should really start getting that kind of available in this country?
100%. Like the fact that our medical system doesn't have this tool in their toolbox, which is having so much success around the world in all these reputable studies, and prior to the prohibition stage in I think it was 60s or something, which was all political. There were some amazing studies coming out curing alcoholism, curing all these range of diseases and treatment-resistant mental health issues, having really amazing results. And the same sort of thing recreated again with really reputable organisations like Johns Hopkins and other universities and research centres. Yeah, I do think it's quite sad that we don't have this avenue here in Australia. Even on that, the fact that they haven't recognised these medicines to have any medicinal value yet, and if they do downschedule them to a controlled substance, it just means that psychiatrists would be able to under lock and key give these to a person under controlled environment. And with the how safe and effective these medicines are, I just think, and the mental health epidemic that we're going through here in Australia, I just can't believe it. It's, for me, it just feels so obvious. You've got this massive problem, and you've got establishments like Monash University with I think they're number 2 or 1 in the world, their faculty, and they've just opened a whole centre that's dedicated to these medicines, and they're getting on board, and the whole, there's so many big businesses understanding where mental health is moving, and it is moving in this direction and realising the value. But our system here in Australia just seems to be so doggedly conservative, or just so resistant to change, that it's forgetting what the reason why all these policies, and it's a mental health system supposed to be helping people with mental health, and there's so much evidence there, and it's really hard to watch, knowing the power of these medicines and having experienced it myself. The fact that there are people out there really suffering, and just the other day I had a mate of mine lose a friend who he worked with in the Airforce to suicide, and it's that's just happening everywhere, and especially within the defence community. And we've got these people that just desperately need help and could experience what I did, which was just wake up out of this depression and get their life back on track. And we're denying them it. It obviously gets me a bit worked up.
You're listening to Wellbeing, a nationally distributed radio show and podcast. My guest today is Michael Raymond, an Airforce veteran with a PTSD story.
Just to highlight the power of these psychedelics, in what has changed positively about your life since you've come back to Australia after doing it?
I feel like I've found a way to, I understand myself better. I've been able to, I had a lot of walls up, and even prior to the military, I struggled with that. So what I did find is, I found this connection with myself, and was able to, sort of fix my internal landscape and really work in that space, and get to know myself, and I don't know, sounds a bit corny, but really value myself a bit better. And in fixing that internal landscape, I've been able to be in a space where I feel like I've been able to serve again, share myself with my family and friends, and that version of me before all the mental health stuff really knocked me over. But I feel like even better than before I joined the military in a lot of ways. I feel like it's just it's really hard to sum up, but the quality of life and feeling a bit more centered and connected, it's just
it sounds
flowed on to the people around me.
Yeah, it sounds like they've really worked though. Like, it's, from what you've told me and how you're kind of describing it, it sounds like they're really effective though.
Yeah, they are. Like, it's a journey. Like, the journey of healing is ongoing. Like, I don't think many people could stand up and say, I'm fully healed and I'll never have a problem in my life again. Like, we all go through the cycles of life, and have to get up every day, and we've got our challenges and all of that, and it doesn't exclude me from that. But just feeling that resilience come back, and that hope, and being able to really feel that lightness come back, it's been really rewarding. It's been amazing.
So what would be the take home from this interview you'd want people to remember the most about all that we've talked about here?
I just would like people to sort of see past the stigma around these medicines, and see that in a controlled environment, these medicines could help not only our veterans, but people struggling with severe treatment-resistant mental health. And I think it would be really sad if we didn't make these available for those people that are suffering.
Well, thank you for being on the show today, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack. Really appreciate your time.
My guest today was Michael Raymond, an Airforce veteran with a PTSD journey. Tune in next week where we talk with someone about their complex PTSD journey. And if you like this content, check out the Wellbeing podcast for more. Thank you for listening. I'm Jack Hodgins, and all of us at Wellbeing wish you well.